It's member-supported Hawaii Public Radio, and I'm Dave Lawrence, All Things Considered. And today a returning guest I've been fortunate to speak with a few times over the years. And it's hard to know what to call you, Geoff Tate, because you're the voice of Queensryche. I don't know how they went on without having you in the band. And now you've got Operation Mindcrime The Key, this incredible album we're going to be talking about, new single, Reinventing the Future. And welcome back to Hawaii Public Radio. Good to have you.
Great to be back on, Dave.
It's nice to hear your voice. And is it a project or a band? What should I think of it as?
Well, I think it'd probably be better described as a project rather than a band. Bands, like in the traditional sense, it's more of an open-ended project where like-minded people get together and create music together.
One of just a number of things, because it's really... Again, like I said, and I mean it from the heart, it's strange. It's kind of like some bands, the Stones, it's, without Mick, I don't know what it would be like. Certain groups, there's just such an attachment to the sound. For me, the sound of Queensryche so much was your voice. So where you go, it's kind of like that sound goes. What I liked about it, Geoff, was it seems like the whole thing, and I could be wrong, it started with a hike through northern Spain, on that hike, it provided the inspiration for the storyline?
Yeah, exactly it. Well, I don't know if you've ever hiked a lot, but, it's 500 miles across northern Spain, and, it's a long ways to go. So you kind of, you can get kind of overwhelmed with the enormity of the journey, unless you kind of break it down and just think of one foot in front of the other, And that's kind of my mindset was to do that. And there's a lot of time to think, and came up with this storyline that I really became enamored with, and I thought that it would fit kind of a large-scale conceptual project, which I've been wanting to do for a while. And I like the idea of telling one long story over 3 records. That sounded kind of interesting to me. So as soon as I got back, I started working on the music for it, and been at it ever since.
So when we think of the Key versus the trilogy concept, so before the hike, did you already know in your mind, I want to try to do a 3-record thing, and then you thought of the first part of it on the hike, or did you think of the whole trilogy concept while hiking?
No, I've been thinking about a trilogy for quite a few years, and just never had the story to go along with it. So on the hike, the idea for the story finally came to me.
You were with your wife? Who were you with on the hike?
Yeah, I was with my wife, Susan.
And did Sabra, Miranda, Bela, Emily, any of them on board?
No, it was just me and her.
Okay. And was there an aspect of the hike that also revolved around scouting out grapes and growing and soil and that sort of thing?
Well, that kind of follows me around, too. Being a wine aficionado and a wine fan, definitely had an interesting time hiking through the Rioja area of Spain, which is one of my favorite types of grapes, and beautiful landscape there, just gorgeous. Is
that why you did the hike to begin with? I mean, what did you guys do? You look at each other and say, "We need to get away. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do?" Or was it, hey, we want to buttress our skills on this aspect of our winery, and we need to go there?
Well, it was really kind of a situation where we'd been through a pretty rough 2-year period leading up to that, and the tour finished finally, and all our legal issues were finished, and it was time to kind of get away and kind of clear our heads and kind of rediscover each other as a couple as well. Spend time together, really, away from music, away from the business, away from everything, really. We found ourselves in Spain.
It's great what it gave you in terms of both the release, the time together, the reconnection, the therapeutic value of stuff like that.
Yeah, it was really, really helpful and beneficial for us, and then ultimately something really good came out of it as well with the music.
And the record has a feel that's not unlike Operation Mindcrime, which was a really classic part of your life, late 80s Queensryche album, concept record for folks who are not as familiar, and a very good one, and an engaging one, much like The Key is. And if you can, kind of walk us through. It's the kind of story, it's a lot more complicated. It's not the kind of thing, well, here's the encapsulated version. It doesn't really work like that with something along this line. So I would never humiliate you or even try to suggest something of that magnitude. But for folks who are tuning in to a public radio afternoon show and curious about it, as we try to get into the record, if you can just talk a little bit about where we're at. I know it's a search. It's something that I can say that it's the kind of thing that changing the way we view the world is something we all seek in a way, and that's an idea about the key.
Well, we are living in really interesting times right now with sweeping social changes happening. The telecommunications that we have now allow us to witness and to influence changing public opinion in a grand worldwide scale now. A story is happening on the other side of the world. You're tuned into it, and people's commentary really does help shape public opinion. So bearing that in mind, the story is, let's see if I can encapsulate a little bit. I don't know if you're a parent, if you've raised children or not. But
no.
As a parent, we begin really early teaching our children or programming them as to what reality is. And by that I mean we define the sky. This is grass. This is a tree. This is a dog, a cat, a table, a chair, an automobile. Those definitions shape our individual view of what reality is. And so in my story, there's 4 individuals that come together and they develop a technology that allows people to see a different reality than what they're taught as children. They begin seeing the enormity of this invention, that it can radically change the world. And because of that awareness, there comes a fracture within the group of people, a conflict. Some of the group want to develop this program into a marketable apparatus that they can make a lot of money from. And others in the group have a more altruistic view on things, and they want to give it to the world because they think that the changes that could come about from it could be significant. And so what the first album, The Key, does is it introduces a little bit about the technology, introduces us to the 4 main characters of the story, and also introduces us to the conflict that arises through the invention of the technology.
And after having to talk about it as many times as you have, boy, you've got that honed to such a great...
Do I?
Really.
I've been working on that.
And I can tell. You come a long way with it. It's really... you are to be credited, young man. As you're talking, I'm thinking, and forgive a brother, because what you're talking about also, when you take 5 steps back, is that programming exists, and you can almost try to reprogram yourself, sort of like reinventing the future, as the song, because we all fall victim to falling in, as you described, the programming of your children. Well, we all become programmed, but yet, as you're pointing out with The Key, attitude and the way you look at everything can immensely change your journey or your voyage. It's almost kind of like what you're talking about with the discovery that these 4 individuals come up with.
Yeah, that's a really neat, interesting analogy. It is a bit like, you ever heard that simple statement, if you want to change the world, you got to change yourself.
Exactly.
It's kind of like that. It's I think the mistake that we all make is we begin to assume that everyone sees things just like we do.
Right.
And I think that's a huge mistake. In the United States, for example, we have this, we're all created equal kind of idea, which is a complete misconception. I think there's no possible way we're all created equal. We all come from different gene pools. We all come from different backgrounds, educations. I think we all should have equal rights, definitely, but we're not created equal. We're all different, very different. But we all are. We do share a lot. The programming of our reality, it happens at a very young age, and when we continue the practice ourselves as we grow older, because we learn the process. I think it actually takes a conscious effort to change that practice in order to see things in a different way.
One of the interesting ways you're approaching it, getting to the 4-character part of it, not a lot of, and that's why I kind of dig the idea that you're handling it. It must be a big challenge for your listeners, because you end up with other voices essentially taking on a bigger role. You have people who you're allowing these characters, and you can elaborate on that if you will, to on different songs step up to the plate and be the lead.
Oh yeah, playing the different characters of the story. Yeah. Kelly Gray sings a lead vocal, and he portrays one of the characters. Scott Mawton, guitar player and songwriter on the album, sings the part of one of the characters. Mark Daly, a young Irish singer, sings one of the parts, and myself. For
fans who know Operation Mindcrime or are familiar with other inventive concept records, they know that those sort of things are necessary. But and again, I'm trying to introduce it to a lot wider audience, and so this is the kind of album that's it's almost like a full production. I'm trying to paint a picture. It's like you're hearing a soundtrack to a stage show of some kind.
Well, I kind of think cinematically when I write.
Right.
I think of the album as a film, and each song is a scene in the film.
Mm.
In that respect, it does offer you, as a writer, a larger palette to write from, and I enjoy that. And it also gives you the ability to assign a character a different voice. And I think it needs to be that way. The character should have its own personality and its own sound.
You're like a director. I totally get the analogy to the movie. No, and it makes sense what you're talking about, and the way you. I mean, you've been doing this. You did the other one so many years ago, so obviously this is something where you know the craft. And on that note, I guess I'm sure it's something that I didn't see a lot. I know that you at one point worked with a Floyd engineer intentionally because you wanted the capabilities that cat brought to the session. But when you think about dialing yourself back to when you were young, I don't know when they first came into your life, but the concept albums or complex recording projects that, as a fan, inform this passion that you have for doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the kinds of musical things that really struck me as a young person. The Beatles, of course, Sgt. Pepper's was one of the first concept records I ever heard. And then later, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here really struck a chord with me. And yes, It's Close to the Edge, Tales of Topographic Oceans, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway from Genesis. These are records that I played every day and learned how to play and cut my teeth musically on that stuff. So that's where I kind of draw inspiration from. I think subconsciously, as a writer, you carry all those musical influences with you along your career, and you add to them, of course, and give things your own interpretation, but you really hang on to your original musical inspirations, I find.
That's cool. So those are some of the records that really, I get it, that shaped, I'm thinking, going into the Operation Mindcrime back in the late 80s, and then obviously that inform where you're at now. Another tune on there that made me think of something that you said in an interview, the On Cue. It has a very clean sound. For me, it reminded me of some of that late 80s Robert Plant that just sounded so tasty on the radio back in the day, like Ship of Fools. Used to sound so nice on the FM dial. And you did this interview recently, and you were talking, it was a great line you were talking about. I'm just going to paraphrase. Hopefully you can remember the concept. But you were talking about how the record business did a real disservice when they sort of packaged bands up by genre, as opposed to a band that does a variety of sounds. Because then you get this, like, they're selling a lifestyle, and you're buying into a lifestyle, which means everything has to sound the same, and it starts to reduce the dynamic properties of the music. And that's why I referenced this during On Cue, because that tune, to me, I love the way you balance in the softer jams throughout the record, and it just made me wonder about if that's a conscious effort to kind of string them out through the record, or also if you can comment on, as you get older, we mellow and we change, and I like songs like that mixed in. To me, it just brings a wonderful texture to the album. Just on that note of the dynamics and not being restricted to be, hey, I'm Geoff Tate, this heavy metal or progressive metal artist, but I'm an artist who has a lot of room, whether it's adding some sax here or whether it's taking it to a really quiet, reflective place there.
Well, that's really some good points you make there, Dave. It's again, it kind of, I guess the answer for you is it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about thinking of the songs as scenes in the film. A story is typically based upon a life experience. And the life experiences aren't static. They're dynamic, and they change, and there's different levels of emotion you feel. There's different intensities, And a song on a record like this, I think, should follow that kind of idea. There's moments of extreme frustration, and that should come out of the music. There's moments of violence. There's moments of introspection and contemplation. And a concept record kind of gives you a lot of room to move and a lot of areas to discover musically. I write a lot of material, and I have it tucked away, and I'm planning on using it on different kind of releases, I like groups of songs that keep the listener in a certain vibe, certain headspace, create a certain atmosphere. But I'd like to get even more extreme with that on future releases, create atmosphere records that really stay within a certain framework, a great album to work out to. There's another album for chilling out after work.
Exactly.
Have it on while you're barbecuing.
Right.
So, just create these kind of atmospheric collections of songs, you know.
It's just cool, that diversity. A thing that I've never really in watching some stuff about you, I saw you in Madison Square Garden back in 2000 with Rob Halford and Bruce Dickinson and the gang from that tour that you did, and it made me wonder about when you were young, 3, 4, 5, 6, whenever it started. When you made the discovery that you could sing, and I mean, you've got this voice. It's like, to me, as I said before, the gift of Queensryche was really your voice. It's a very special voice, and you know that. The discovery of it. Where were you? Tell me a story when you're young. Your mom's there. Somebody who just says, "Jeff, you got this cannon, dude. I don't think you know what you got going on," and just the development of that, if you can.
Well, I honestly, there really wasn't a significant moment like that. It was more, I had been studying to be a musician for many, many years, starting when I was 9 years old. So I was constantly in bands, as in school orchestra, school band, jazz bands, and started working with bands out of school, forming rock bands and building synthesizers and all kinds of musical experiences. But I wasn't in a band necessarily in high school. I was just kind of floating around. I had friends that were in a band. They needed a place to rehearse. My grandmother had gone on vacation for the summer and left me in charge of her house, so I invited the band to rehearse at her house. Big mistake. But in some ways it was very good because the band had a singer. They were practicing, getting ready for a whole series of shows. Like the first weekend, the singer came down with like some kind of terrible sickness, and he had to be hospitalized, and he couldn't sing. And so the guitar player in the band invited me to take his place. He had noticed that I was singing along to the band rehearsing, and he could hear me singing above the sound of the band without a PA. And so he said, you have a really strong voice. You ever thought about, singing in the rock band? And I said, well, no, but I'll give it a shot. So that kind of started me. And that was junior year in high school, I guess.
What got you at 9, though? I mean, at 9. What was that all about? You start being into music at 9. What was the record? What was the moment? I mean, for me, it was Kiss. I got a cop to it. But for you, where was it?
It was Jefferson Airplane, actually. Yeah, I heard a song by Jefferson Airplane on the radio.
What song?
I told my mom. It was Somebody to Love. And I told my mom, I want to do that. How do I do that? And she says, well, that takes being a musician. And to be a musician, you have to study music and you have to play an instrument. So what do you want to play? And I said, well, what's that sound of that right there? What is that? She said, that's an electric guitar. I said, that's what I want to do. And she said, well, that takes you being a certain age. So in order to play a guitar, you have to take a year of piano lessons. So I took a year of piano lessons, and I never went to the guitar because I just totally got off on the piano. And that kind of started me.
What a beautiful thing. At 9 is when you discovered Somebody to Love.
Yep.
You know what's so weird, dude? Just a couple months ago, Jack Cassidy and Yor McAlkinen were in through town, and we had them right in the studio talking story about, you know who that is, I'm assuming. You know who that is.
Yeah.
And it's just so amazing how close all the roads circle.
Oh, yeah, it is. Well, that's, music is a kind of an evolutionary animal. As musicians, we all are inspired by each other, and we take little bits and pieces from all those, inspirations, and we add them to what we do, and what we do inspires somebody else, and it's just a big, long story.
It really is, and that's neat to know. And there were not singers that you particularly, because I get the concept records. We know that where you got the love of the complicated music, and we know really where the first band came from, the Airplane. That's so cool. But were there particular vocalists? When you hear your voice and you think of you in the metal paradigm or whatever it would be, you'd think, well, Halford, you would assume he got off on Halford. Are there specific cats like that you can point to?
Not really specific singers. I think I was more
of a band guy,
or less influenced by the music itself.
That's cool.
I started really early figuring out that music was math, and that you have all these elements that are working together. So I started. First, I was always affected by music emotionally. First and foremost, that's what does it for me. And then, being a songwriter and a player, you start picking it apart and figuring out the mechanics of, well, how do they make that sound like that? Or what's happening within the chord to make it ring like that? Or how's that melody working with that chord progression? You start tearing it apart and figuring out the mechanics of it. But I never was really influenced by a specific singer or guitar player. I just liked a lot of people. You know, I liked what they did, or I looked at the song first. You know, well, how does the song make me feel? You know, does it excite me? Does it interest me? Does it make me feel something?
I get it.
And some singers and some players have the ability to really put across a really beautiful emotion, whatever that emotion is that they're trying to capture, the delivery of it. Like you look at John Lennon, he wasn't like a really what I would call a super expressive singer, but he wrote really pretty melodies that stick in your head. Somebody like Tom Jones, you know, what a dynamic big voice he sings with. Halford, again, he's an amazing, powerful singer. Somebody like Sade, very moving singer in a very strange way, kind of a detached coldness to what she does, but it has this amazing emotion to it that's like, you know, struggling to erupt, but never does.
I totally know. Those tunes are very nostalgic when you hear the Sade songs. It gives you a weird feeling. It's like transportive to somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I look for in music, and I guess what I try to emulate when I'm writing as well.
And I know your timeline is you got 2 more of these bad boys. I've seen you've got it all sort of staggered out for the next couple of years to follow this one. Do you balance in the wine? Like out of 100% of your year, was it going to be 70% The Key, 30%? What's the pronunciation on this?
Oh, Insania?
Insania. So is it 70% The Key, 30% Insania, or how much time, you know, over the year are you going to spend on the wine?
Well, I just actually got back from Germany for the harvest there. I haven't got much to do with the wine, you know, for a few months. So I'll be touring the new album. Looking forward to that. It's going to be a really fun presentation, I think, for people to hear and to see.
When's the Honolulu date? Is that January? What was that? 3rd, 4th?
You know, I've never played Honolulu. I've never played Hawaii. In fact, it's the only state that I've never performed in. I got to fix that.
Seriously, we have to bring that to a screeching halt.
I've played shows in 56 countries around the world, and every state in the United States except Hawaii. How about that?
Well, here, I'll put a thing in your head. You figure out a way to just come out and do a one-off kind of thing in Honolulu, and you make a vacation out of it. And I will send your guy a link to check out our radio station's boutique performance space. Holds 75 people. It's absolutely gorgeous, acoustically superior thing. We've had Ben Vereen, Ziggy Marley, Godsmack, Neil Sean from Journey, so many people in there. The Hot Tuna Guys, Roger McGuinn of the Byrds. And maybe you do a gig in there, do something acoustic, something weird like you're talking about, one of these atmospheric things. Maybe even do it as a benefit. And you can have a vacation, enjoy yourself, and explore somewhere you haven't been. Take your gorgeous family with you.
Well, that sounds like a real treat.
You know what I mean? I'm trying to throw a good idea at you.
That's a really good idea. Right on. Well, that sounds like a great idea.
So, hey, it can't hurt to throw good things at a good man. The Key is the record. Reinventing the Future is the single. It's Geoff Tate. You know him from Queensryche. You know him as just this great voice, and hopefully you know him for having a fun interview on the show here.
That was great. You're like one of the best, Dave. Really relaxed style, great questions, introspective stuff. Yeah, it's great. And you never asked me about my hair, which is really a pleasure.
Nah.
Okay, well, thank you.
You're welcome. God bless you, and I give you a big hug and a high five.
I feel it.
And you be safe, and we'll talk again soon. God bless you.
All right, take care, Dave. Thank you.